Hey guys, welcome to Telling the Told and Untold. My name is Tshego. There aren't any content warnings for this video, so we're just gonna go straight into it. For today's case, we're going all the way to Krugersdorp, which is a mining town situated on the west rand of Johannesburg. And the first thought a lot of people have when they first hear Krugersdorp are the satanic cult murders that took place, but it's most commonly known as Devilsdorp. I have covered that case, so if you haven't watched that video, I'll link it up here or here. I'm not too sure where it is. On the 18th of August 2008, 18-year-old Morné Harmse and his younger brother, who was 15 years old, walked to school like they did every single morning. They stayed about 1 kilometer away, so it wasn't much of a distance. But on this particular morning, Morné had a school bag that he threw out of his bedroom window, and once he and his brother got out of the house, he quickly picked it up and they walked to school, and they got there around 7 in the morning. Once they got to school, the two brothers went their separate ways, and Morné went to his 3 friends, and they were later joined by a group of their peers who were all in the same grade as them. Then one of Morné's friends, his name is Marco, he pulled out a wooden box. He opened it, and inside this box looked like a homemade bomb. He then explained to Morné how to detonate it, and Morné said that once they went to the hall for assembly, he would detonate it like in the hall. Morné then took some things out of his backpack, and inside of it he had black paint, 3 homemade masks, as well as a couple of swords. He then smeared the black paint all over his face. He put on the homemade mask, and it looked like one worn by the lead singer of a band called Slipknot. He also put on gloves as well as knee and elbow pads. One of the guys in the group, his name was Sean, sorry. He then decided to take a picture of Morné in this outfit that he had on. Morné then told his friends that they should put on some masks and take the swords, but they were hesitant. They really didn't want to, but one of them did. His name was Max. He put on a mask, and then Morné kind of convinced him to hold a sword, but he really didn't want to, but eventually he did. And then Sean took a picture of them together, and immediately he took the mask off and put the sword on the floor, and then he told the group that they should probably head to assembly. Max would later say that the reason why he put on the mask and held the sword was because in that very moment he was very scared of Morné. After this, Morné said, and I quote, "Today is the day. Today I will begin with the massacre and bloodbath. Today is the day that you can get back at those who did bad things to you. Today I'm going to kill people left and right. When the school bell rings, I'm going to do it." The friend who had taken a picture of Morné, Sean, then told him that he should just let go of the bomb, like just put it away. But Morné said that he couldn't let go of it because if he did, the bomb would go off. It was later discovered that the bomb didn't have any explosives, so it wouldn't have went off either way. After this, Sean just took the bomb out of Morné's hands and just threw it to the side. On his person, Morné had 3 swords. He had a long sword in his hand, and he had one on his back in a scabbard and one on his side. At around 25 minutes past 7, students started walking to the hall for assembly, and this is when his friends realized that Morné was serious. He was serious about wanting to kill all these students. A couple of students saw him as they were walking to assembly, but they thought that he was just joking, so they looked at him and they just started laughing, and then they just proceeded on their way to the hall. And this is when Morné looked at his friends and he said, "Look at how cool this is." And then he took the sword and he just slashed it at one of the students that was walking past them at the time, and his name was Jax Pretorius. He was hit on the back of his neck, and immediately he collapsed and he stayed on the ground. Morné then hit another student, his name was Stefan Bauer, on his leg, and Stefan asked Morné why he would hit him, and he just grinned at him and then hit him again on the side of the head with the bladed part of the sword, leaving an 8 centimeter long gash. He tried hitting Stefan again, and then he started chasing after a group of students, and this is when he came across two workers from the school, and their names were Lesiba Sam Manamela, who was 43 years old, as well as Tiamo Joseph Kudisang, who was 26 years old. He swung at Lesiba's neck, but he managed to block it, but the sword did hit him on the elbow, and then he took the sword and struck Tiamo, and it hit his ear as well as his cheek. And afterwards they started to flee, and as they were fleeing they passed a classroom that was outside, and they saw a student lying on the ground in his own pool of blood. As all of this was happening, Sean ran to the hall and he saw one of his teachers. He immediately told the teacher that a student's head had been chopped off, and the teacher didn't think much of it. He didn't really think that Sean was being serious, but then he saw how distraught Sean was, so he started heading into the direction that Sean ran into, and this is when he saw a boy walking towards him very calmly, and this boy had a mask on and he was holding a sword. The student then went to the central quad of the school and he just stuck the sword into the grass and he sat down, and then he lifted 3 fingers up. The teacher then went to the student and asked him to take his mask off, but the boy just shook his head no. And then out of nowhere, another student came, took the sword out of the grass and ran into the crowd of students. The teacher managed to get to him and told him to return the sword, and the student did. He put it back into the grass, and it turned out to be Mono's younger brother. Finally, the headmaster appeared and he went to Mono, who was still sitting on the floor, you know, with his fingers up, and he told Mono to take his mask off, and immediately Mono did. He then took Mono to his office, and once they got there, he asked Mono what he had done, and Mono basically just told him to relax, like he was fine and nothing was going on. At this point, police officers had arrived at the school, so the headmaster went to go speak to them, and he left Mono sitting on a bench outside of his office. And as Mono was sitting on this bench, one of his friends approached him and just sat down with him, kind of just to ask him what was going on and what he had done, and kind of just understand what had happened. And as he sat down, he says that Mono looked at him and just started laughing and said that he would probably be raped tonight in jail. He also told his friend that using the sword wasn't like chopping plants in the house. He said he was surprised by how easy it was, or how easily it sliced through human flesh, and he said that he hoped that he would go to prison and receive the death sentence. The friend would later tell police officers that whilst they were having this conversation, Mono had no remorse, like he had no emotion, like he was very happy, like he was grinning and smiling, like they were just having a normal conversation about like the weather or something. He later told another student that he really enjoyed hurting the people that he did, and he doesn't understand why he stopped. The paramedics had also arrived at the school at this time, and Jogs, the first person that Mono had struck, was still lying on the ground and he was not breathing and he didn't have a pulse. Paramedics worked on him for 45 minutes, but they couldn't save him and he was declared dead. The cause of death was a penetrating incised wound of the neck and spine. The wound itself was 14 centimeters long, and the blow had fractured the second cervical vertebra and his spinal cord was visible. The whole incident only lasted a couple of minutes, and just after 7:30, Superintendent Mere arrived at the school and the headmaster told him what happened and what Mona had done, and immediately he arrested Mona. He also took some of the possessions that he found, and he found a black school bag that Mono had, and inside of it there were tarot cards that were known as Major Arcana, and the pack usually comes with 22 cards, but the first card was missing and it was a card of a magician. He also found other things, and it was just ordinary stationery. He found a pocket knife, 3 more swords, 3 homemade masks, as well as a small stationery bag that contained drawings that the superintendent would later describe as satanic creatures. Because Max had also been seen wearing a mask and holding a sword, and there was also a picture of this, he was also arrested, but he would later be released. The case seemed like an open and shut case because they had arrested the perpetrator on the scene. There were countless of witnesses and everything was very straightforward. However, the investigating officer wanted to go a step further. He just didn't want to close the case and just take it to trial, but he just wanted to make sure that he covered his bases and that whatever Morné's lawyers said, they would kind of have evidence to dispute that. So whether Morné said that he had a psychotic break or anything like that, he just wanted to make sure that they would be prepared for anything that the defense might come with. Morné was sent for a month-long court-ordered mental assessment, and it was later extended to 2 months, and throughout this period he saw 3 psychiatrists and they found nothing wrong with him. They declared that he was fit to stand trial and he knew the difference between right and wrong at the time of his crimes. No mental diagnoses were made except that he did suffer from depression. So who is Morné Harmse? His mother says that he was an unplanned pregnancy, and before and during his birth she did suffer a lot of complications. She had to undergo an emergency C-section because of a placenta abruption, and once Morné was born, he was a very sick child for the first 18 months of his life, and he suffered from a lot of breathing difficulties and convulsions. Growing up, his parents were very worried because they would look at his size, his body size, and they would look at his age, and they just thought that it didn't correlate, to the point that in grade 5 they decided to take him to a growth clinic just to make sure that everything was okay and he was just a healthy boy despite his small size. Morné preferred his own company, and he would often spend times in his bedroom alone playing video games. He felt rejected by his parents and he felt like he couldn't turn to them for any guidance or counsel. He was also afraid of his father and couldn't stand him. He said that his father made him feel powerless, and because of this he had a lot of built up aggression. His mother says that he used to draw detailed sketches of his school as well as some of his neighbors' houses, and at some point she thought that he might break into the school, break into his principal's office or the cafeteria to steal something, but it turns out the reason why he had drawn a sketch of his school was because he wanted to break into the chemistry lab so he could steal some chemicals, because he wanted to make his own bombs from scratch. Morné was also interested in the cult, magic, Wicca, horror stories, war accounts, SWAT surveillance teams, and tactical warfare. He imagined the kids at his school as terrorists and fantasized about attacking them, and he had a reoccurring fantasy about blowing up a mass of people. He thought the kids at his school were stupid, and his ambition was to become a soldier, and he thought that if he studied and researched things like bombs, when he eventually got into the army, or when he applied for the army, he would be categorized higher and would have a higher chance of getting in. In grade 10, he started researching topics related to psychology and psychiatry, in particular schizophrenia and psychopathy, and this is because he thought that he was different from his peers and he just wanted to understand why. Morné also had a history of substance abuse. He would frequently smoke marijuana, and he said that he had tried LSD once, but according to his friends, he would smoke marijuana regularly, and he had started using LSD a week before the incident occurred. When news broke out about what Morné had done, the community thought that it had something to do with Satanism, and it kind of caused satanic panic, and this was because of the tarot cards that they had found, the superintendent describing the drawings as satanic creatures, also just because of Morné's interest in the occult and things like that. So because of this, it just caused a lot of satanic panic, and they wanted to stop this panic basically, so they decided to call in the founder of the SAPS Occult Crimes Unit, and they wanted him to provide an opinion on the case. So he looked at Morné, his interests, and just what he liked, looked at his bedroom, things like that, and from this he had 3 findings. The first one was that the incident was intentional and planned. It was based on a group agreement, so basically it does not appear to be a satanic ritual crime. The second thing is that Morné experimented only on a superficial level with elements of magic, and the last thing was that there was no indication of him being possessed before, during, or after the crime. It is said that even without his opinion, the sentencing would have remained the same. Like, it really wasn't needed, but considering the panic that it had caused, it was just needed to settle people's fear, you know. In his arrest statement, Morné said that he wanted the respect of his peers and he just wanted them to fear him. According to him, throughout his schooling career, he was severely bullied because of his small height and his small build. And sometimes they would take his school bag and they would just throw it from one person to another. But from interviews from his peers as well as his teachers, it is believed that he wasn't as severely bullied as he made it out to be, but it doesn't matter because the experiences he had from this bullying still caused him to do what he did. It is believed that something could have done to stop the crime from happening, and this is because Morné showed evidence of planning this crime up to a year before it happened. He had also made the masks himself for that particular incident. 2 weeks before the attack, he began to withdraw socially and spent more time in his room cleaning his swords, which he had purchased about 2 to 4 years prior to the incident, and he had his own personal collection. He also had a drawn layout of the school, and also others knew about his plans prior to it happening, including his brother, his friends, and some acquaintances. Even though they might have not believed that he would have went through with it and thought maybe he was joking, they still should have told someone like a teacher or their parents, you know, should have told someone, not just think that he wouldn't go through with it and just thought that he was joking because they would joke around, you know. On the 13th of April 2009, Morné Harmse pleaded guilty to 1 count of murder and 3 counts of attempted murder, and the next day he was convicted of all counts. Then on the 10th of September 2009, he was sentenced to 20 years imprisonment for the murder of Jacques Pretorius, 8 years for the attack on Stephen Bauer, and 5 years for each attack on Lesiba Sam Manamela and Tiamo Joseph Hudisang. Morné didn't stay out of trouble during his time in prison. In 2015, he set a fire to his cell, and there were also 2 other incidents of him setting a fire. He was also found in possession of self-made weapons and repeatedly threatened to kill another inmate with a weapon. Whilst in the hospital section of the prison in 2016, he attacked a paraplegic inmate as well as fought with other inmates in their communal cell. He had 2 other fights whilst he was in prison. He was also found in possession of marijuana, and he had been demoted in terms of his privileged group numerous times. He also had gang affiliations from 2009 to 2019, and he committed his crimes in his final year of high school. However, he didn't complete his matric until 11 years after he was sentenced. In 2019, Morné Harmse was up for parole and he had appeared before the parole board 8 times, and it was believed that he wasn't going to be let out on parole, and if this was the case, he would have been released in 2029 after serving the entirety of his sentence. However, on the 4th of March 2022, so literally a couple of months ago, he was released on parole, and this is despite the DSC psychologist reports that have consistently maintained that he should not be given parole due to the danger he poses not only to himself but to others as well. And that's it for today's case. If you guys have any comments, please leave them down below. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and all that jazz. And I'll see you guys next time. Bye.